She didn't stop loving him. She just got tired of explaining what love truly meant. Because love isn't something you say. It's something you understand. The emotional truth. Welcome back to my channel, The Emotional Truth.
Sometimes life does not warn before it collapses. It does not explain itself or soften the moment. One day, everything feels familiar. The rhythm of waking up, the comfort of routine, the illusion of stability. And then something quietly shifts. Sleep no longer feels like rest. Silence no longer feels peaceful. The heart begins to carry a weight that cannot be named, and the mind searches for answers that do not arrive. This is the moment most people believe they are breaking, because nothing dramatic happens on the outside, yet everything is changing within. There is a rarely spoken truth about these moments. The soul often recognizes an ending long before the mind does. What feels like confusion is actually transition. What feels like heaviness is the weight of something old loosening its grip. The ego resists because it was built to protect what is familiar, not what is true. And when familiarity dissolves, the ego interprets it as danger. That is why this season feels uncomfortable, disorienting, and lonely. Not because something is wrong, but because something false is leaving. The nervous system does not immediately recognize healing. Trauma psychology explains this with precision. When a person has lived in survival mode for too long, calm feels unsafe. Stillness feels suspicious. Silence feels like abandonment. The body learned to stay alert because alertness once meant survival. So when life finally slows down, the system panics. Exhaustion appears without reason. Emotions surface without warning. Tears arrive without a story. This is not weakness. This is the body releasing what it was never allowed to let go of before. There are versions of the self created only to endure. Versions shaped by disappointment, neglect, emotional inconsistency, and unmet needs. These versions learned how to hold everything together. They learned how to adapt, how to please, how to survive in environments where love felt conditional. Over time, these survival identities become familiar. They feel like personality. They feel like truth, but they were never meant to last forever. And when growth arrives, these versions begin to dissolve, not because they failed, but because their work is complete. This is where pain deepens, because letting go of survival feels like losing oneself. The mind asks questions that feel dangerous. Who is someone without struggle? Who is someone without proving worth? Who is someone without holding everything together? These questions create the sensation of free fall, but free fall only feels terrifying because control is being released. The soul does not rebuild on unstable foundations. It clears the grounds completely before anything stronger can rise. Stoic philosophy speaks quietly here, without comfort or drama. Anything built on control will eventually collapse. Anything built on truth will endure. This season removes what was never aligned. Relationships that required self-abandonment, roles that demanded emotional exhaustion, dreams shaped more by expectation than desire. To the outside world, it looks like loss, but internally, something precise and intelligent is happening. Weak foundations are being dismantled so something real can finally exist. There is often deep loneliness during this phase, even when surrounded by people. Conversations feel hollow, old distractions stop working. The inner world is changing faster than the outer world can reflect, creating a quiet separation. This is where many try to return backward, clinging to familiar pain because unfamiliar peace feels unsafe. But backward no longer exists. The door has already closed. What remains is forward, even if the path is not yet visible. Somewhere within this unraveling, a quiet strength begins to form. Not loud confidence, not forced positivity, but awareness. Awareness that not everything needs to be fixed. Awareness that not every emotion needs a reaction. Awareness that walking away can be an act of self-respect. This awareness settles slowly, without announcement. And once it settles, life no longer feels like something to survive. It begins to feel like something to inhabit. This is not falling apart. This is the early architecture of rebuilding. Quiet, unseen, unimpressive to the outside world, but foundational. What rises from this ground will not recognize the version that once begged for stability, because this time, strength will not be built on endurance. It will be built on truth. As the noise inside slowly quiets, something unfamiliar begins to appear. It does not arrive as happiness or relief. It arrives as space. Space between thoughts. Space between emotions. Space between impulse and reaction. At first, this space feels empty, almost uncomfortable, because the mind was trained to fill every silence with worry, every pause with explanation. But this space is not emptiness. It is permission. Permission for the soul to finally speak, without interruption. This is where surrender begins, not as weakness, but as wisdom. Surrender is not giving up on life. It is releasing the illusion that control ever created safety. Trauma taught the body to hold tightly, to anticipate loss, to brace for disappointment. Faith teaches the opposite lesson. It teaches that what is meant to remain does not need to be gripped, and what is meant to leave cannot be held by force. In this realization, the heart slowly loosens, and the burden of constant vigilance begins to fall away. Giving a broken heart to God is often misunderstood. It is not a dramatic moment. It does not come with certainty or instant peace. It happens quietly, in exhaustion, when the soul admits it no longer knows how to carry everything alone. This is where divine restoration begins, not by fixing what is broken, but by holding what is wounded. Healing accelerates not when answers appear, but when resistance ends. As rebuilding continues, emotional patterns begin to shift. The urge to chase fades. The need to explain dissolves. The compulsion to prove worth weakens. Where urgency once lived, patience settles. Where fear once dictated choices, discernment now guides movement. This is not emotional detachment born from numbness. This is emotional maturity born from clarity. The heart still feels deeply, but it no longer bleeds everywhere it touches. There is a profound change that occurs when self-worth becomes internal rather than negotiated. Love is no longer something to earn. Attention is no longer something to compete for. Validation is no longer borrowed from others. This shift is subtle, but its impact is irreversible. Relationships begin to reorganize around this new frequency. Some connections strengthen, others fall away naturally, not in conflict, but in misalignment. The mind may still revisit the past, but it no longer lives there. Memories lose their emotional charge. Old conversations replay without pain. What once triggered collapse now barely registers. This is how healing reveals itself, not by erasing the past, but by neutralizing its power. The nervous system learns that it is safe now, safe to rest, safe to choose, safe to let go. At this stage, silence becomes sacred. It is no longer something to escape. It becomes something to protect. Silence is where intuition sharpens, where truth surfaces without distortion, where decisions are made without fear. The rebuilt self does not rush into noise. It listens, it observes, it waits. And because of this, it rarely chooses wrong. Strength now looks different. It does not raise its voice. It does not demand recognition. It does not explain itself. It simply moves with quiet confidence. Boundaries form without aggression. Distance is created without guilt. The rebuilt heart understands that access is earned through consistency, not promises. This understanding changes everything. What once felt like abandonment is now understood as protection. What once felt like rejection is now seen as redirection. The pain that once consumed the heart is reinterpreted as instruction. Nothing was wasted. Nothing was meaningless. Every fracture shaped awareness. Every loss refined discernment. Every silence taught self-trust. This is the moment when gratitude quietly replaces grief. Not gratitude for the pain itself, but for what it prevented, what it revealed, and what it made possible. The rebuilt self does not romanticize suffering. It honors growth. It chooses peace without apology. It chooses alignment over attachment.
And from this place, life no longer feels like something that happens to you. It feels like something you participate in consciously. Choices are slower. Yeses are rarer. Nos are cleaner. Energy is protected. Time is respected. The heart becomes selective, not because it is afraid, but because it finally knows its value. This is not the end of rebuilding. This is the stabilization phase, where the foundation settles, where strength integrates, where faith becomes embodied rather than spoken. The chaos that once defined this season fades into memory, and in its place stands someone unrecognizable to the past, yet deeply familiar to the soul. What rises from this season does not fear loss, because it no longer abandons itself. It does not fear silence, because silence is home. It does not fear being alone, because solitude is no longer emptiness, it is connection. This is not falling apart. This is what it looks like when God rebuilds quietly. From the inside out.